tutti, benvenuti a questo 13° incontro.
Good morning. Welcome to this international convention of justice ministers. We thank you. And we have Anna Ascani, Deputy President of the Chamber of Deputies of the Republic of Italy. And we have members of the community of Sant'Egidio here at the International Convention. It's a long path we have walked. This is the 13th edition. The importance of carrying on, of always carrying on, is something I wish to stress. This is an appeal for life. If it becomes a global movement, it reaches everyone. It reaches the institution. It reaches the parliaments.
It's mine. È spinto. Dei governi.
Parliaments, governments, and society. This is the method of the community of Sant'Egidio. Taking on a challenge, cooperating with cooperation among all spheres. The struggle against the death penalty becomes an interreligious dialogue. It involves civil society, and it involves society in a number of countries. In some countries, there have been problems. We have problems even with reference to COVID. There is war. There are wars going on. But we have managed to create a reasonable platform, gradually understanding the opinions, the background of different worlds, of different universes. Not everything is the same in the world. There are differences, and we must be able to respect everyone if we want to be effective. We have indeed worked together. We've done everything together. We have made a number of appeals over the past years to describe, to tell everyone what we have done. We're helping the inmates in death row and telling about the friendships we have made with those who fight our same fight. The work we have performed, we have carried out in prisons all over the world. I would like to mention the United States, the death rows in United States, in Africa, the visiting inmates, the value of visits, the importance of not forgetting the many liberations that have actually occurred in Africa, the release of many inmates that were unfairly sentenced to death. The work we have done at the United Nations with a petition, 5 million signatures, a great petition for the moratorium in 2007 at the UN with Mario Marazziti, a number of conventions, conferences, schools, universities, movements pro-life. So our work has been very, very thorough, and it has involved many people, and it has been enlightened by many important human meetings meeting actual people. I'm thinking of Dominic Green in Africa. He was the death row, and he became a true friend of ours in this universe of death rows, this sphere of his element of prisons. That's before he was actually executed. I'm thinking of Bill Perkin, who forgave Paula Cooper and actually ended up saving a life. And he has become the true soul, the true driving force of the relatives and the movement Not in My Name. And our friend Tamara Chikunova, who had the death penalty abolished in Uzbekistan. She had a very, very troubled life. Her life was entirely dedicated to life against the death penalty. She saved many lives. A woman who was not afraid to take on single-handedly the powerful of the world. We enjoyed quite a number of successes with abolitions and moratoriums in several states of the United States. And Mr. Marazziti mentioned this in a number of African countries. So we have a number of allies as well in this path. And I would like to tell you more about this work that carries on. I would like to thank all those who perform it on behalf of the community. And it is very significant right now that because of the war, death is unfortunately spreading. And I'm saying this as I welcome the youngsters who are here in attendance today, whom we would like to give hope for the future. There are other ongoing wars, not only the one in Ukraine. I'm thinking of Syria, Afghanistan. I'm thinking of Afghan women. The community of Sant'Egidio is well aware of these worlds, of these realities, of these wars that it is trying to halt. I'm thinking of the terrible shipwreck the other day, the many innocent people who were killed, the closed doors, the concept of closed doors, which also goes for prisons, and that's the title of the book of by Mario Marazziti, which is called Open Doors. That's how things can be different. It is our goal to open doors. In fact, we want to fight for life. There is a need for this. We are not satisfied right now. Anyone who has these problems at heart knows that the community of Sant'Egidio is an ally. Concluding, I'd like to mention the war and talking about the abolishing death penalties, moratoriums, the end of the war. It seems to be a bit of a paradox. This era is rife with a spirit of revenge, and retaliation sometimes seems to be legitimate. So why are we against the death penalty today? I think there is a connection between the two topics. We don't think that war is a solution to any sort of problem, as the Italian constitution says. We are convinced that the death penalty, likewise, does not solve a problem. It's not a solution to the problem of crimes. We think that violence leads to more violence, and we think that the death penalty is something that is reversible. It cannot be reversed. It doesn't heal the wound. So answering evil with evil is negative. It ends up fueling an endless cycle when it comes to justice and international relations. It is fair to defend one's lives, one's rights, and one's country. But we must not think that evil is unavoidable. That would be inhuman. We are not prepared to give in to this notion. Every single war must be stopped as soon as possible, because as it carries on, it lays the foundations for more wars. Likewise, we think that the death penalty should be halted because it carries a message that we are giving in to violence in society. The idea that violence is unavoidable. It's part of man's life. The moratorium on the death penalty corresponds to a sort of truce, the truce in a war. The state does not fight fire with fire. It does not kill. The institutions must accept to must accept a limitation, must accept to be reasonable as they await a change, a conversion that can happen only if life continues. We must punish by all means, but we must not fight fire with fire. There's a lot of us who have been working on this. There are many unknown prisons we know very little of, where there are a lot of people suffering and they are abandoned. In order to create this coalition, to grow stronger, to create a coalition of defenders of life when life is not totally appreciated. This is something that is fair, the coalition of the willing. There are too many people who are killed, who die. We have seen this on the Italian coastline, on the coast the other day. So it's time to to stop this. Let's try to help men stop what is inhuman in men. Thank you.
A questo punto darei...
I would leave the floor now to the Deputy Chair, Speaker of the Chamber of Deputies of the Republic of Italy, Anna Scani. We know her very well. She's been a Member of Parliament since 2013, so she has great experience. She has held a number of offices in the government, Deputy Minister for Economic Development. Over to you. Thank you.
Tempo ci attivano. No. It is not working, the microphone. Yes, it is working now. Okay? Okay.
Good morning. Good morning once again. Thank you for having me here, dear friends of the community of Sant'Egidio, honorable ministers, delegation heads. It is an honor for me to welcome you to the Chamber of Deputies for the 13th International Congress of Justice, Minister, Jurists, and members of Supreme Courts for the movement No Justice Without Life. I'm particularly pleased to welcome students, the students here, hoping that this day can represent an added value to your education. If we are here today, credit goes to the community of Sant'Egidio, whom I thank sincerely for their commitment at an international level against the death penalty. Indeed, thanks to the community of Sant'Egidio, which has been organizing these meetings since 2015 in order to make Africa, to free Africa from the death penalty, to free the world from the death penalty. Today, we have a further opportunity to enhance synergy between international institutions and civil society in order to achieve together results that seem to be still far away, but they are possible. Italy has been a strong ally in promoting a global world moratorium for the death penalty. I am particularly proud of my country in this regard, but once again, there is still much to be done. Following the initiative of the Italian government upon the proposal of the European Union in 2007, a resolution was approved at the UN with 104 votes in favor, requesting an international moratorium on the death penalty. This was a crucial step for a very strong commitment, encouraging all member states to comply with international standards that ensure the protection of the rights of the inmates and restricting the use of the death penalty. It is worthwhile pointing out that last December, this Parliament voted at the Foreign Affairs and EU Committee a resolution that commits Italy to the global moratorium against the death penalty, to abolish it hastily through dialogue with a number of organizations working on the topic and extending the relevant sanctions. The commitment of the community of Sant'Egidio, together with Italy and other countries that want to abolish the death penalty once and for all, has an innovative and holistic approach that focuses on dialogue and on cooperation on international cooperation. We want to achieve common goals that allow all citizens in the world, give them all equal rights and justice. The holistic approach that aims to develop synergies and create consensus at a government level and in terms of public opinion has turned out to be effective over the years. It is the very spirit of friendship, together with legal counsel, development of reforms and laws that made possible in December 22 reaching 125 votes in favor of a moratorium, the resolution, UN resolution, increasing the number of members who are in favor of the abolishment. Italy has worked hard in this regard and has helped the number of countries that support the moratorium increase. The entire Italian diplomatic network has got going to raise awareness among a whole lot of countries on this paramount issue. This happened because the Republic of Italy, in its constitution, Article 27, points out that penalties cannot consist in treatment that is inhuman, and they must take into account the conditions of the inmate, and they reassert that the death penalty is not envisaged. The protection of the human element is confirmed in the rule, and this is ensured through cooperation with a proper criminal system. Italy's commitment in this regard was clearly described by Cesare Beccaria in his De Delitti delle Pene. It is a paradox that laws that are an expression of the people's will, which punish homicide and murder, it would be absurd, it would be a paradox for these laws to punish and kill a person. The death penalty is pointless because it does not re-educate, it does not rehabilitate, it is not proportionate to any sort of crime, and above all, it is not a deterrent. The importance of having here at the Chamber of Deputies the International Congress of Justice Ministers is in the dialogue, in the debate between different opinions, which must always be fostered at an institutional level. So we thank you for your very precious contribution, and I wish you a fruitful session. Welcome to the Chamber of Deputies. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Speaker Ascani, and we thank Italy for the work it pursues at the United Nations and in Europe for the moratorium. I was mentioning allies and friends. There are two countries that we've been working with closely and support us, and we leave the floor to them, above all to Ambassador Dennis Noble of the Swiss Confederation. Ladies and gentlemen, ministers, excellencies, my dear friends, I ask my French-speaking friends to excuse me, but I will switch to English.
Great pleasure for me to attend this international conference on behalf of the Swiss government. I'm glad to welcome so many distinguished participants coming from all around the world to take part in this important event. I would like to thank the community of Sant'Egidio for their invitation and organization. Switzerland has had a strong partnership with you for several years. Our cooperation has proven fruitful, including also in the framework of this Congress. Ladies and gentlemen, this year we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Drafted by representatives with different legal and cultural backgrounds from all parts of the world, the Declaration set out for the first time fundamental human rights to be universally protected. Article 3 states that everyone has the right to life. When the Declaration was proclaimed in 1948, however, only 8 countries had abolished the death penalty. My country had abolished capital punishment in 1942 for ordinary crimes, but would wait until 1992 to abolish it for all crimes. Ever since, the universal abolition of death penalty has been a priority for Swiss foreign policy. Today, 113 countries have abolished the death penalty. We live in a time of growing pressure on human rights in many parts of the world. But there is international progress and a positive global trend of countries which acknowledged that the death penalty infringes the most basic human rights to live. This means that these countries have acknowledged that there cannot be justice without life, as the title of this Congress emphasizes. In 2022 alone, Central African Republic, Equatorial Guinea, Papua New Guinea, and Zambia abolished capital punishment. I welcome the ministers representing this country today. Switzerland congratulates these countries for this historical milestone. We also would like to congratulate all the other countries which may not have abolished the death penalty, but are nonetheless attending this conference. Your commitment to dialogue and your openness deserve prize. Permettetemi di concludere con due parole in italiano.
Allow me to conclude by speaking Italian. I would like to thank the community of Sant'Egidio for organizing this convention. Last Monday, the Convention on Human Rights was started in Geneva, celebrating the 75th year of the Declaration of Human Rights as the war in Ukraine rages on. At the Palais des Nations, there was outside the Palais des Nations, there was a rally, an Iranian rally in favor of fundamental human rights. All this shows how topical, how relevant this meeting is today. How a meeting, No Justice Without Life, is. It is not a paradox, Mr. President. Actually, quite the opposite. There is still a lot of work to be done, and we thank community of Sant'Egidio for their tireless effort.
I wish you constructive and fruitful exchanges during this Congress. I hope that they will lead to concrete results on the path towards a world without capital punishment. Thank you very much.
Ringrazio, signor ambasciatore.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I agree, this is no paradox. And in particular, I'm thinking of everything that goes against women, girls, and women's education. I will hand the floor over now to Anne Eastwood from the Principality of Monaco, another country that is very, very close to our battle. Thank you.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, everyone.
To emphasize the language and cultural diversity in this room, I will proceed in French. Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres,
Ladies and gentlemen, ministers, excellencies, representatives of the authorities, dear friends. I'm particularly happy to address this audience after my Swiss colleague today, to extend a welcome to all the delegations that are represented here on the occasion of this 13th conference, where we're going to talk about the importance of justice, no justice without life. It's been a few decades since the time in which the community of Sant'Egidio started promoting the abolition of the death penalty, and the Principality of Monaco is very proud to bring forward this initiative, and I would like to thank Marco Impagliazzo, the community of Sant'Egidio president, for allowing us to join them in this battle. The death penalty has always been something that has been deeply rooted as a question to address from a religion, cultural, ethical standpoint. The abolition has to face strong resistance in certain regions, but important steps forward have been made in this very important field regarding the protection of human rights. Many countries today acknowledge that the death penalty is incompatible with the right to life. It is a ruthless, cruel penalty that has no deterrent effect. Out of the 193 UN member states, almost 3/4 of them have already abolished the death penalty, de jure or de facto. And this trend is becoming more and more evident. In 1962, the Principality of Monaco became the 10th country in the world to abolish the death penalty in their constitution. And 2/3 of the countries have already included the death penalty in their legal system and continued to adopt it. But many steps forward have been made. We know and we see how many countries are supporting today the abolition of the death penalty, or at least a moratorium for the abolition of the death penalty. And the Principality of Monaco has been supporting this movement since 2007. 125 countries have signed this moratorium last year. The Principality of Monaco is deeply committed in this battle, a battle that means listening, that means dialogue, to convince those countries that still are not convinced about the fact that we can protect society from crimes without exercising this form of state violence. The abolition of the death penalty is an act of justice, compassion, responsibility. In this regard, this Congress, like the many other initiatives that have been promoted by civil society, like the Global Congress Against the Death Penalty, have shown that we truly have the power to change things. With increasing insecurity and fears, but also when faced with the temptation of certain countries of using the death penalty as an instrument to retaliate or to exercise control for political purposes, we have to avoid the threat of going back to the past, which would mean weakening our conscience, which would mean losing sight of the moral needs that teach us not to fight evil with evil, but to stay human, also when faced with inhumane acts. I'm certain that we will contribute to bring forward initiatives to eliminate and abolish the death penalty once and for all, de jure and de facto, and we will make sure that criminal law will stick to the dignity of human life within the framework of an effective repression. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you all the best.
Merci Madame l'Ambassadeur, e vi prego di portare.
Thank you very much. And of course we extend a welcome to all the heads of states and government. Let's now move on to the introductory speech by Mario Marazziti. You all know him. I have the pleasure to say that he's not only a member of the community of Sant'Egidio and a journalist, but he was an MP, also president of the Social Affairs Commission. He was also chair of the Mediterranean Institutes, and he cooperates with the community of Sant'Egidio with respect to the moratorium, and is one of the founders of the World Coalition Against the Death Penalty. Before handing the floor over to him, I would like to welcome all the delegations present, the ministers, jurists, members of the Supreme Court of Burkina Faso, Chad, Ethiopia, Ghana, Guinea, Conakry, Morocco, Central African Republic, South Africa, Sri Lanka, East Timor, Gambia, Zimbabwe. I'm sorry if I forgot some countries, but unfortunately the speaker is not speaking in a live microphone, so we are having trouble listening and hearing actually what he's saying. Thank you very much. Please, Mario. Thank you very much, Mario. He's the chairman of this meeting. I would like to thank everyone who contributed to the organization of this Congress. After 3 years, we are finally here face to face. As you know, due to the pandemic, we weren't able to meet. No justice without life. It's a great message for a world at a difficult time, marked by war and new divisions in the world. And this is why we're here today, representing so many countries, especially from the south of our world. There is no justice without life. This is our goal. And this goal becomes even stronger because it entails the ability of countries to reduce violence in communities and societies. That is why this International Congress of Justice Ministers, in my view, is even more important at this time. We're in Italy. In 1786, the Grand Duchy of Tuscany abolished capital punishment for the first time in the West, along with torture. We're in Rome, where the Roman Republic, albeit briefly, abolished the death penalty in 1849. We are here at the Parliament of the Italian Republic, which made irreversible the rejection to use the death penalty in its constitution after fascism. Italy is one of the founding partners of the European Union, and in the treaties for the establishment of the European Union, there is clearly stated that all forms of capital punishment are rejected. Here in Rome, decades after the birth of the United Nations, the statutes of the International Criminal Court for Crimes Against Humanity was approved. That court, those statutes, does not even foresee capital punishment as a penalty against genocide. There's a very simple idea at its core. Even the greatest crime cannot be punished with death. And our countries can be safer without any unnecessary deaths. The foundation of law, of all law, is always the protection of life. This is the purpose of lawmaking. States cannot exacerbate the violations of life with another death. I would like to thank all the distinguished ministers that are here. And from here, from this parliamentary hall, I would like to say that we are honored to have you here, each and every one of you. There are no big or countries or small countries here. There are no virtuous countries or less virtuous ones. We are all equal. We are all the same dignity. We share the responsibility of a dream and a purpose to attain. No justice without life. Some of us have already abolished, after long efforts, capital punishment. Others have not yet done so, but we are all equal. We are simply in a different time in history, and we want to make sure that our experiences can be put at the service of others, because history is moving towards the abolition of the death penalty. We want to speed things up. We want to make sure that we all be part of the same history. After 4,000 years, at the time of the Hammurabi's Code, 2,000 years BC, we are at a breakthrough in history. No generation has experienced this before. In 1976, only 16 countries in the world out of 200 have actually abolished the death penalty. It has always existed. Today, there are 144 countries that actually no longer use it, either abolished by law or de facto. And in 2021, only 16 countries have executed convicts. In the last 5 years, executions have decreased considerably. by more than 1,500 to just over 500. More specifically, 576 in 2021. In 2022, 17 countries have used the death penalty. So there's a change in history. There's a breakthrough. We are at a tipping point. So today's meeting is meant to help us be part of this history. Once again, let me say there's no such a thing as a big country or a small country. Just like at the UN, every vote counts exactly the same, has exactly the same value. Everyone here is key in strengthening a resolution for a universal moratorium. Those who abolished the death penalty have encountered the same difficulties as those who are considering how to reform their criminal and judicial systems. We can share difficulties, we can share challenges, but also solutions. Europe has given up the death penalty after being the stage of the greatest atrocities in human history. Japan, which still maintains it, also although rarely used, had abolished the capital punishment for 3 centuries, where all European countries were still using it. Chinese influence on Japan was very important. That is why they abolished the death penalty. Even if today China is still amongst the country that is actually implementing the death penalty, there's no cultural tradition in this regard. So is it not naive to deal with the death penalty when there are so many violations of life in contemporary wars? I just came back from Syria. The earthquake have come on top of great destructions, great suffering. Is it not naive to pass a non-binding resolution at the UN for a universal moratorium of executions? I think not. Because since that ethical and political standard was set by the UN General Assembly in 2007, and Vice President Ascani mentioned that as well, every execution has become heavier because it goes against the widespread feeling of a large part of the world, like torture, like slavery, because it's the only survey carried out on countries that have abolished capital punishment, and the rate of murders and serious crimes has recorded an increase, a slight increase, only in Georgia. And all the other 10, there has been a considerable decline, either immediate or gradual reduction over the following decade, whereby more severe crimes and murders have reduced because society learns to use less violence. So abolishing the death penalty helps society reduce violence and to have more faith in their countries because they are freed of abuse and error. Capital punishment brings the whole of society to the level of those who kill, promising an impossible recovery from pain for the families of the victims by causing new victims. It is unnatural. It is a scientifically organized death. It is premeditated, so it is a mental torture in itself. Even before a physical one, it is a legitimization of the highest level of a culture of death while passing itself off as a defense of life. It is an irreversible tool to fight social, religious, ethnic, political minorities. It might open up new conflict scenarios. There would have been leaders like Nelson Mandela or even Gandhi if it had been applied. The world is getting to know a more effective justice when it no longer uses capital punishment, which is always somewhat a declaration of failure of the state, when they put all their strength against someone who's in prison already. With Equatorial Guinea and Zambia, and Papua New Guinea, we've heard, in 2022, the abolitionists have grown. In Africa, since 2000, 14 countries have abolished the death penalty, and I think they deserve an applause. And with the countries that still have it in the legal systems but no longer use it, there are now 144 abolitionist countries, so 3/4 of the countries in the world. Since 2000, 45 states have abolished the death penalty. So on average, 2 every year. It's also been 20 years since the birth of the global movement of the Cities for Life promoted by the community of Sant'Egidio. 58 cities at first, now more than 2,400. So a question is rising, starting from Rome. Pope Francis, the Pope of Rome, summarizes the many universal reasons that are the root of the rejection of the death penalty. The death penalty is always unacceptable. This is what Pope Francis says, because it undermines the inviolable dignity of the human person. I'm pleased here to recall some examples, like what happened in Burkina Faso in 2018. Bessolet René Bagoro, a former Minister of Justice, strongly advocated this development. And they were supported by the initiative of the International Congress of the Ministers of Justice in Rome. This meeting, today's meeting, is an incubator for an exchange of good practices between countries that are maintaining the death penalty and countries that are promoting the abolition of the death penalty, as it happened previously for Mongolia and other countries like the Central African Republic, Guinea-Conakry and others. By way of conclusion, are there any cases where the death penalty is not only just but necessary? I think there's never such a thing as a just punishment if it does not offer the possibility of change. If you look around the world, the curve of executions and the curve of serious crimes are not even related. They lead independent lives. There is no such a thing as an infallible justice system, as a flawless justice system. In a country that is proud of its justice system, we've got here the former governor of Maryland who had the courage to sign the abolition of the death penalty in his state, in the US. Well, in the US, a system where the judicial system is so well known thanks to movies and films, and there's lots of resources are available. The Innocence Project has shown that at least in one case in 15, the person that's being convicted is innocent, sentenced to death based on confessions and eyewitnesses that in 80% of the cases are not true. They have been mistaken for someone else. And at least 1 in 9 of the convicts is innocent, or might be innocent. So now, in the US, there are 24 countries that are still retaining the death penalty, but 23 have abolished it. In 2021, Virginia, in 2020, Colorado, in California, Oregon, and Pennsylvania, the governors have declared moratoriums on all executions. So there's a connection between the geography of violence and the geography of the death penalty, which perfectly matches the geography of ethnic and racial discrimination. In the US, the map of places and states of lynchings against minorities 1 century ago and that of the death penalty tends to be the same. Death rows everywhere cause mental torture. a death that will come, you don't know when, in an unnatural manner. Worldwide, there are at least 8.6 million convicted prisoners, not in the death rows, but in the death rows there are 32,000 of them. In Asia, 1/3 of people that have been sentenced to death are actually living, and almost half of those 8.6 million are in the US, China and Russia. We want to humanize prisons as well. Sant'Egidio is putting efforts in the world to humanize life in prisons, because this helps countries as well, because this reduces violence, because it helps people be reintegrated. So this is an holistic approach, a bottom-up approach, working with the governments, working with the political decision makers and politicians, working in death rows, working in prisons, but also in nursing homes where the elderly sometimes are kept as convicts. So we have to humanize life on all levels. We have to help our countries to put a stopper on civil war, conflict. And this is one of the fundamental purposes and goals of Sant'Egidio, to regain that taste for life. So this is the holistic approach, because of which we are here today, and that can give results. And you are not alone. We are small, but we are by your side. So I think we need to think about the incompatibility of the death penalty with democracy, also in the West. Because democracy is based on the possibility of making a mistake, on the ability to change, of going back to government also after defeat, even after a season of wrong policies that you can correct. Wrong policies can also claim more victims than individual violence, and the death penalty is linked to that. So the irreversibility of error is incompatible with democracy, with the very same idea of democracy, because it would entail the risk of annihilation and annihilating everyone. Even democracies must think about what they're doing and get to a full abolition of the death penalty. So together we must have the courage to answer a very simple question, the question a child would ask. But if the one who kills has to be killed, who should kill the one who kills who is killed? This is a children's question, but we've got an answer, and the answer is in our hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mario Marziti, for your presentation, which kicks off this 13th International Congress of Justice Minister. We now leave the floor to Africa. We have two speeches by ministers from Africa. I will leave the floor to Mr. Mulambo Haine, Minister of Justice of the Republic of Zambia, a lawyer and politician who was elected to the Parliament in September in 2021, and in September he was appointed Minister of Justice, and he deals with a number of items.
I'll try and replicate the greeting. Buongiorno a tutti. Good morning, everyone. The chairman of the meeting, fellow honorable ministers of justice here present, your excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. May I also recognize members of the clergy here present. I'd like to begin by expressing our sincere thanks for being invited to this very important Congress, and indeed to express gratitude to the community of Sant'Egidio for organizing this event. Let me also thank the hosts, the city of Rome, and indeed Italy as a country, for having us here. I've had the opportunity of living in Rome for 3 months, way back in my earlier life, and I must say, I'm glad to be back home. I also take special recognition of the students that have joined us this morning. It's nice to see those enthusiastic, young, beautiful and handsome faces. You're most welcome. Today, I proudly stand here to give a very brief story of Zambia's latest journey in the fight for life, if I can put it that way. Because the last time I stood before a similar gathering was at the 8th Congress Against the Death Penalty in Berlin, Germany, and we had, at that occasion, as the Republic of Zambia, made certain declarations, promises, and indeed commitments towards no longer being simply a de jure abolitionist state. Zambia had had a moratorium of close on to 25 years from 1997, immediately prior to the milestone we achieved last year. And so this is why I say I am proud, and indeed on behalf of the President of the Republic of Zambia, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, whose will to take this bold step made it a reality, because as at 23rd December 2022, Zambia became it was previously a de facto abolitionist state and became a de jure absolutionist state following the amendment of our penal laws. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, after the announcement by the President of the Republic of Zambia on the 24th of May 2022, that is on the eve of the Africa Freedom Day, that Zambia would work through Parliament to amend the Penal Code and the Criminal Procedure Code, chapters 87 and 88 of our laws, in order to abolish the death penalty, the Ministry of Justice of the Republic of Zambia tabled before the National Assembly the necessary amendment bills. The two bills passed through the 3 reading stages in the National Assembly and were signed into law, as earlier mentioned, on 23rd December 2023, thus effectively abolishing the death penalty in Zambia. Perhaps to give a little bit of a clearer perspective on what is meant by the amendment of the penal laws, our legal system is structured such that the Constitution of the Republic of Zambia recognizes the right to life, except there was one derogation, in that where a court of competent jurisdiction handed down a death sentence for capital offenses, then a person could be executed. It thus follows that where the provisions that gave authority to courts of law to pronounce a death penalty were removed from the statute book, then there was, in effect, abolition of the death penalty, which is exactly what we did. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, this was not the end of our resolve to abolish the death penalty. There remained 2 cardinal milestones to be completed before the job is done. And in particular, it was in reference to those persons that had been convicted and sentenced to death prior to December 2022. I am happy to report to you here present today that as of February 2023, like just a couple of days ago, Zambia had 390 inmates that were on the death penalty before abolishment. And subsequently, His Excellency the President signed pardons for all 390, so that there is no longer any individual in any correctional facility Thank you. There is no longer any individual, I repeat, in any correctional facility in any part of the Republic of Zambia that is faced with a death sentence. The second milestone will be to ensure that the Constitution is amended in due course so as to remove the exception that allows any court to pronounce a death sentence. This is merely to ensure that no other government post this current regime is able to reverse what has been done. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, that being said, it is and remains the commitment of the Republic of Zambia to support all efforts globally and on the African continent to ensure that the death penalty is by and large done away with. It is our hope, prayer and belief that by taking the bold steps that we have as a republic, we will remain or will be a beacon of hope to all persons that potentially face the death sentence anywhere in the world, and particularly on the continent of Africa. We want to be a beacon of light on the continent, and indeed from our own moral standing that we have taken this very important and very bold step. 25 years of moratorium, and only now do we have a government that has been brave enough to say we'll do this and make sure that our laws reflect our ideals. And for that, I reiterate that we stand proud amongst the community of nations. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to also make a firm commitment that aside from observing the abolition of the death sentence, we will continue to observe our international obligations under the various human rights treaties to which we are a party. And as I conclude, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to point out one important and cardinal factor in the fight against the death penalty. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, your excellencies, when all is said and done, Zambia in its process of abolishing the death penalty is alive to the need for the following. A, support to the victims that have lost loved ones from acts of a nature that lead to the loss of life. The reformist agenda should never be blind to the suffering of the victims and the need for appropriate societal measures to help them find closure. B, it is our objective to ensure that training is given to police and other law enforcement agencies to help curb the incidences of capital offenses. We also would like to find a way of increasing capacity, that is as item C, of our law enforcement agencies so as to ascertain what the root cause of some of the most prominent capital offenses, well, previously capital offenses, is, especially with regard to criminal activities such as aggravated robbery and murder. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Zambia, being only 2 months old as an abolitionist state, is consciously searching for solutions in regards to the foregoing, and looking forward to learn from other abolitionist states and their work and efforts that they have made towards the matters that I have listed above. And as I end this very brief address, let me encourage all nations and participants here present to continue with this noble fight. I also wish to make special reference or special mention again to the community of Sant'Egidio for the work that they have been doing in this particular space for several years. We as the Republic of Zambia have had a long, fruitful relationship with the community, and we must commend them for the work that they are doing globally and on the African continent. I wish to thank you for listening and for having us give this address today. Thank you.
Grazie signor Ministro, thank you very much indeed for your work.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Working with Zambia has been indeed paramount to ensure justice more effectively. I now leave the floor to another lawyer, the Minister of Justice of the Republic of South Africa, Ronald Osi Lamola. He has worked with the African National Congress, and he is a member of the committee.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. The community of Sant'Egidio and the leadership of Sant'Egidio, thank you for organizing this conference and inviting us to continue to participate on the quest to preserve lives. Academics who are here, students, the clergy, ladies and gentlemen, it is with a great sense of honor that we gather here today, almost 28 years since South Africa has abolished the death penalty. Moreover, South Africa has also just marked 25 years of a democratic constitution coming into effect. We also gather at a very difficult time in the geopolitical world and politics, and just for the lives of citizens, the global economy. The world's rise to the level of communities have become polarized by our differences. Our gathering today goes into the heart of what a human rights-based approach should be to the global criminal justice system. History is replete with the reality that human rights are not asserted by violence, but rather by a response that values a human life. As mentioned earlier, this year marks the 28th year in our country's constitutional court, and one of its most groundbreaking judgments that has been quoted across the globe and universally acclaimed, the State versus Makwanyana abolished the death penalty through our constitutional court. I would like to draw your attention to another case with a similar time frame, which profoundly frames the paradox at the heart of the criminal justice system in our country. In a judgment cited as S versus Kutia, our former Justice of the Constitutional Court, Justice L.B. Sachs, wrote the following, and I quote, "There is a paradox at the heart of all criminal procedure, in that the more serious the crime and the greater the public interest in securing convictions of guilty, the more important constitutional protections of the accused become. He goes on to say, the harmfulness of the offense is one of the givens, against which the presumption of innocence is pitted from the beginning, not new element to be put into the scales as part of the justificatory balancing exercise. This is an incisive observation on two fronts. Firstly, it raises the possibility that an innocent person may find themselves being subjected to the death penalty in spite of their innocence. Secondly, it makes one question, if were not matter of which society wherein those who cause harm are forced to reckon with the consequences of their actions. At the heart of the criminal justice is not a pursuit of vengeance, but justice. Justice does not only judge the persons before the court, it adjudicates the actions of society as a whole. Therefore, the ultimate solution in addressing the harms that criminals accrue to society is not limited to afflicting a consummate response on the perpetrator, but also helping society understand why our communities produce individuals who are of this caliber. It goes without saying that where there is a death penalty, crime is not deterred. In fact, the consensus across the globe is that there is substantial evidence that there is no credible evidence that the death penalty deters crime more effectively than long-term imprisonment, or the system of ensuring that people are prosecuted, they are arrested, and an appropriate sentence that is proportionate to the offense is meted out. Countries that have a death penalty laws do not have lower crime rates or murder rates than countries without such laws. Where the death penalty has been there is also no significant changes in either crime or the murder rates. As we gather here today, there is consensus that state sponsors vigilance in the form of the death penalty does not alter society. If anything, it makes the world even more violent and inhumane. Our country is committed to making international law a binding force of our multilateral institutions and the global community. The values of our constitution and the international law are mutually reinforcing and interrelated. As a result, we have taken the approach of our extradition and mutual legal assistance framework to affirm the right to life. Our extradition Act, which is currently being considered for amendment, makes it clear that where an offense is punishable by death or any other inhuman or degrading punishment under the laws of the requesting state, South Africa will be obliged to engage the requesting state to provide assurances to that the death penalty or any other inhuman or degrading punishment will not be imposed, or if imposed, will not be carried out. We believe that this approach will enable us not only to uphold human rights culture in the world, but also ensure that our commitments in forums like this and in other multilateral institutions are credible and continue to spread across the globe. Holding the global community to account for human rights violations is a shared responsibility. It is not just the purview of the select few. And we, for this reason, continue to participate in this Congress of the Community of Sant'Egidio. And it's for that reason that we're grateful that you continue to ensure that we share ideas on this and to ensure that we maintain a world free of the death penalty. Your good work will continue to be supported by us, and we hope that the entire global community will continue to share lessons, share ideas, and continue to exchange notes on how to ensure that the world continues to preserve life while meting out appropriate justice to perpetrators of crime. Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. The community of Sant'Egidio acknowledges the leading role of South Africa, this great country that has fought a lot for its freedom. And we think that an alliance between Sant'Egidio and South Africa is absolutely crucial in order to pursue these goals in the world and to support human rights in the world. So thank you very much. The last presentation of the morning session, I leave the floor to Martin O'Malley, who was governor of Maryland, and Maryland did sign the law that abolishes the death penalty. That's the 18th U.S. state today. He is the commissioner of the International Commission Against the Death Penalty, so he will speak in his position as president. Thank you.
Buongiorno a tutti, since everybody else is doing it, right? My name is Martin O'Malley. I am the 61st governor of the state of Maryland. And now that I've been promoted to the rank of citizen, I am a commissioner on the International Commission Against the Death Penalty, the only one, I believe, from the United States of America. And I am joined here today by my colleague, our leader of the ICDP, Rajiv Narayan, and my colleague, Elena Pisa. And I want to thank the community of Sant'Egidio for pulling together this really impressive assembly of men and women from every part of this beautiful and diverse earth. And Mario, thank you for your kindness, for your friendship, and for having me here today. I'd like to, I'm the only person that stands between you and your coffee. And yet I am the last camel, and the last camel carries the heaviest load.
You know how the coffee is important for Italians.
I know how important the coffee is for Italians, yes. Or for people that are 6 hours behind you here in Italy. So let me attempt to share three things with you. I want to give you a brief update. Mario's already talked about the state of play in the United States. So I'd like to give you a brief update on that. I'd like to share with you one story of one state, namely my state, in repealing the death penalty, which I hope can be of encouragement to many of you that are on different parts of the journey in your own home countries, each of which is very important to the whole. And then finally, I'd like to offer you a reason why it is so important that so many of us have come from so many places to be here today. So shalom, peace, assalamu alaikum, namaste. There is, I believe, an African saying, Minister Haimbe, and congratulations to you in Zambia. When we met in Berlin, you told me that before Christmas you were hoping to repeal, so thank you for the present you gave to the entire world by repealing the death penalty in Zambia. There is, I am told, an African proverb that says that if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. For all of the diversity that's in this room, there are certain things that unite us. We're united in our belief in the dignity of every person. We are united by the embrace of our own responsibility to advance the common good that we share as people of our own nations, as people of this planet. And finally, we are also united by our understanding that there's a unity to spirit and matter, that what we do in our own lifetimes does matter, that each of us is important, and as the Talmud says, if you save just one life, it is as if you have saved the world. My own state, and the state of, or rather, before I do that, let me share with you an update on the United States, which, as the title implies, is a willing combination of 50 states. The longer trajectory of this state of play is this. We have never had as many states in modern times that either have repealed the death penalty, have a de facto moratorium on the death penalty as we do today in the United States of America. As I was creating a list with progress on one side and regress on the other, there were a lot more points of progress than there were of regress. So let me highlight, let me start with the regress, and then we'll end this part with the progress, shall we? We have had, the United States, sadly, has not returned to her true self yet on the international stage when it comes to the UN resolution. While we had a majority of nation states supporting it, sadly we were not able to persuade the United States to change its vote. But we're hopeful because we had a larger grassroots organization, coalition of organizations advocating for a shift in that vote than we ever had before in the last, whatever it has been, 6 times that vote has come to the UN. That coalition included not only death penalty action, but also the Civil Rights Coalition of the United States, whose membership include the NAACP, the Urban League. We had over 1,939 people that we know of that contacted the White House urging a shift and a change in that position. In other words, we called the question, and I believe that eventually the United States will return to her true self on the international level. At home, President Biden, the first abolitionist president in modern times, elected or perhaps ever, elected in the United States of America, maintains a moratorium on federal executions in the United States. The Justice Department has furthermore not authorized any new death penalty actions in federal court. So all of that is positive. And once again, bills have been put in the House and in the Senate to repeal the death penalty on the federal level, and they continue to grow. The states are the places where the action has to take place first, though, before the United States can move. That just seems to be an aspect of our federal system, that once enough states move, we saw this on marriage equality, we've seen this in other movements. Once enough states move, then the entire United States moves as a national government. So we have the outgoing governor of Oregon commuted all of the remaining people on death row in the state of Oregon not too very long ago, just after the last election. We have governors in Kansas, Kentucky, and Ohio, 2 Democrats, 1 Republican, sending various signals that they are open to repealing the death penalty, and bills continue to progress in those states and gain some greater legislative background. In places that are pro-death penalty, South Carolina and Tennessee have kind of legal moratoria that have been placed by their courts. In Arizona, a newly elected governor appointed a commissioner to examine the death penalty and has expressed her own opposition to the death penalty. And in the state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, just to our north, a newly elected governor declared just last week that he would not be signing any death warrants as governor, and he urged their General Assembly to send a bill forward for the repeal of the death penalty in Pennsylvania. So the larger trajectory of the movement in the United States is towards abolition and repeal. And I really want to thank so many of you in this room, indeed other nations of this world, for continuing to encourage us at home at this moment in our democratic journey. Second, let me share with you a little bit about the story of Maryland. I'm not going to share with you the whole 350-year story of the history of Maryland. I just wanted to share with you one aspect of it, which is our battle our effort to repeal the death penalty in Maryland. In 2006, in a hard-fought race for governor, I challenged an incumbent Republican governor who was more popular than I was, even on the day when we eventually defeated him. In the course of that rather bruising campaign, with its 3 televised debates, the issue of the death penalty came up not once. Not in any debate did we discuss the death penalty. But after winning the election and before I could be sworn in, our highest court, our Court of Appeals, struck down our death penalty, saying that it had violated various administrative procedures in adopting the manner of death, which was lethal injection. And so we had a decision to make. And we had a lot of other difficult things that I was elected to get done as well. The decision was, do we put in new regulations to dot the I's and cross the T's for a policy with which I had always disagreed and had publicly stated as Mayor of Baltimore and before that on the City Council is inconsistent with the people that are trying to make their part of this earth safer and more respectful for life. So do I put in new regulations or do we go for repeal? And the rub in going for repeal was that after a cursory head count, and I'm also a lawyer, recovering lawyer. I was not a math major, but even that count told me we did not have the votes to repeal the death penalty. So what do? We appointed a commission led by former Attorney General of the United States of America, Benjamin Civiletti. And Ben Civiletti, with a lot of patient listening, people who had lost loved ones to very violent deaths and were themselves in favor of the death penalty, people who were opposed to the death penalty. That very diverse commission held hearings all over our little but also very diverse state, listening patiently through the tears and the passion and the grief and the loss, and after a year of hearings, issued their report, which in summary concluded that the death penalty can never be infallibly applied. It has never been fairly applied. It is costly, it is time-consuming, it is wasteful, and those resources could better be used for the things that we understand, if done in concert, can actually save lives. And so, armed with that very reasonable approach, I went back to the General Assembly. I pulled forth all of the mighty power invested in the governor of Maryland, and I came up 2 votes short in the state Senate. And I had a Democratic legislature, but the Senate president, who was a Democrat, was a person who himself had led the charge to institutionalize, put into law the death penalty after some Supreme Court decisions. And so we had a tough row ahead of us. But nothing beats a fail like a try. So we organized, brought people of many faiths together, Jewish, Catholic, Muslim, Protestant, every faith in our state. We organized a big rally, and we made it a gubernatorial issue. I testified before the General Assembly, talked about it in the state of the state, and on our way down to the state capitol, a reporter said to me, "Your Senate president says you still only have 22 votes. What is your response?" And I said, well, the Senate president certainly has a reputation for being able to count. And while it is true that I might only have 22 votes, I have faith that the Holy Spirit might find 2 more, and she's never late. And so we called the vote. And I came up 2 votes short again. And then we had an election. In taking a head count, it looked like we didn't have the votes yet. But then something happened, right on time. One of those senators who had voted, even though he was of my party and even though he knew I was passionately committed to this issue, he told me that he was kind of looking to get out of politics and over a beer in an Irish bar. This senator told me that he's willing to change his vote on the death penalty because he knows it's important to me, and he could have either gone either way, and he now understands that he probably should have gone the way of repeal. So if I were to find another vote, he'd be willing to switch his. Then something else happened. Not exactly miraculous, but in the course of human events, sometimes people in the legislature decide they want to retire early. So a Republican senator who proclaimed herself to be pro-life in every way except the death penalty retired early, went back to her real estate practice. God bless her, enjoyed serving with you. And then I had the responsibility, really in a ministerial way, to appoint the person that was succeeded to replace this Republican senator by the local Republican Central Committee. And so I did. And as I was walking up across the brick sidewalk into the State House shortly after taking pictures and administering the oath to him a couple of days later, he sees that I'm alone with nobody but my 4 bodyguards. And he pulls me up by the sleeve and he says, Governor, I just wanted to let you know didn't have a chance to say this to you when you were swearing me in, but like you, I'm a Catholic. And I said, yeah, we all have our crosses to bear. And then he said, but like you, he said, but unlike my predecessor, I'm pro-life on all issues. He said, including the death penalty. And so we called a vote. Nothing beats a fail like a try. If you want to go far, you go together. And the Holy Spirit's always right on time. And we were able to repeal the death penalty, got it out of the Senate, always had the votes in the House. And we became the first state south of the Mason-Dixon line to repeal the death penalty. And we've been followed by others, including Virginia. And so in conclusion, it's very, very important that we gather on this issue. And I want to thank all of you who've come from so many places. Again, thank you to Sant'Egidio, Anne-Marie, for squiring me around and making sure I get places on time as well. I'll leave you with the reason, I suppose, why all of us is here. And it was so clearly articulated many years ago by one of the most famous sons of Maryland ever to walk on the world stage in this strive for greater respect for the dignity of every individual person. And I'm talking about none less than the great Frederick Douglass. This is the reason we're here. And Douglass summed it up with these words. He said that we are one. Our cause is one. And we must help each other if we are to succeed. Thank you.
What a story.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin O'Malley, for telling us about this struggle, this fight he fought in his state, which can be an example for many. We now have a break. I would like to welcome Deputy Minister Francesco Paolo Sisto, Deputy Minister of Justice of the Republic of Italy, who has just joined us. We'll have a 20-minute break, so we will meet again at 10 minutes to 12. Thank you.
Speaks for itself. Are we changing seats? Are we going to?
I think so. Paolo, cambiamo qui o no? Loro cambiano? Loro due? Sì. No, vogliono sapere dove si devono sedere.
Gentili ospiti.
Dear guests, take your seats, please. We're going to resume in a minute.
Bene. Onorevoli ministri.
Honorable ministers, ambassadors, we're ready for the second session of this 13th International Congress of Justice Ministers. Before handing the floor over to the Deputy Minister of Justice from the Republic of Italy, I would like to welcome Bishop Vito Suliando Rikin from Indonesia. We would like to thank him for the contribution he's going to give to the debate this afternoon. Thank you again for coming. Thank you for being with us.
Do volentieri la parola.
So I'll hand the floor over to the Deputy Minister of Justice, Francesco Paolo Sisto, representing the Republic of Italy. Is a lawyer, is a professor in university. In 2004, he was appointed advisor to the Parliamentary Anti-Mafia Commission. He was appointed as MP for the first time in 2008, Under Secretary for Justice in Draghi government. Was recently elected senator and then appointed Deputy Minister of Justice. Senator, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the President of the Chamber of Deputies that is our host today, the distinguished Ministers of Justice, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I asked to wear the lapel pin, No Justice Without Life. And I didn't do that by accident, because I would like to praise the community of Sant'Egidio for organizing this initiative. So thank you to the President. Thank you for welcoming us. And I would like to welcome the Diplomatic Corps and all the other diplomats that are here. And I want to show this sense of belonging I'm feeling. So a physical sharing that is manifested through today by wearing this lapel pin on our jackets, but it is actually inside us. It goes way beyond this pin and has its roots in our hearts, in our culture, in our faith, and in our conscience. I'm here on behalf of Carlo Nordio, the incumbent Minister of Justice. He couldn't attend today's meetings because he's in England right now. Just let me know that according to an old theory, for those who love the forensic profession, I always say that we are politicians by accident, but we are actually part of our background. So what is usually said is that to convince others, the first one to be convinced is you. And this is key for approaching these questions. We must all be deeply convinced about how barbaric the death penalty is, to be capable reasonably and rationally to convince others about the soundness of this principle. Our fight against the death penalty is deeply rooted in the collective conscience in Italy. It was said already, it was abolished for the first time in the Grand Duchy of Tuscany in 1786. It was the first time ever in the West, way before there was political unity in Italy. I would like to remind you that the International Day Cities for Life, Cities Against the Death Penalty, that is celebrated every year in the 30th of November in more than 2,000 cities in the world, is actually recalling the first abolition ever of the death penalty by the Grand Duchy of Tuscany in 1786. We firmly believe in the need to abolish the death penalty all over the world, and as every good counsel, we have to bring facts to support our convictions. So we have submitted the first moratorium for the abolition of the death penalty to the General Assembly in 2007. Our constant commitment as a country being a member of the UN General Assembly is to promote a widespread support to the resolution on the moratorium against the death penalty. Over the years, the number of countries that have supported this resolution has been growing. We started with 104 supporters in 2007, now we've got 125. But above all, the number of negative votes has gone down from the 54 we recorded at the beginning. We now have 37 countries against it. The Congress of the Ministers of Justice, organized by the community of Sant'Egidio, has now come to its 13th edition. So it's a meeting that is culturally important, but also useful in terms of the results it brings. And this is confirming that this is not just any stage. It is a stage of humbleness where we all agree to obtain common purposes that are important for life. The commitment of the Republic of Italy against the death penalty is based on the conviction that the death penalty is inhumane. It's not a deterrent against crime. This has to be stated very clearly, and it makes judicial errors irreversible. As respect towards our constituent fathers, I have to recall that under Article 27 of our Constitution, it is explicitly stated, because our Constitution is the result of the ability of our founding fathers to write a decalogue for a country to be defined as truly free and democratic. So, as I was saying, in this definition of democracy, we cannot but include the fact that the death penalty is against humanity, and death penalty is not acceptable. This is our faith. This is our tenet. This is what characterizes us. Something we cannot give up, something that is irreplaceable to keep our commitment and keep going in this regard. So it is a question of human rights. Then statistical data are also supporting our beliefs, because even the best of principles must be supported by data confirming the soundness of the principle itself. So the death penalty brings no added value in terms of security of our citizens, safety of our citizens, or is no deterrent against crime. Quite often, the only way that we believe should be pursued is that of prevention of crime, and this is often set aside in favor of the death penalty. People said the sanctions come often too late. When sanctions are levied, the event has happened already, and somehow the state was unable to prevent it from happening. So we believe that the way to prevention, or towards prevention, must be pursued, enhanced. We must believe that preventing crime may be more useful than punishing crime in a barbaric and disproportionate manner. So Italy is deeply involved in bilateral bilateral, multilateral awareness campaigns. We are not interested in state revenge. We're not interested in people believing that taking a life might be a compensation for justice. This is no justice. The Italian actions are inspired of the principles of inclusion to place more value on the choices made by third countries in the path towards a moratorium and possibly the abolition of the death penalty. We keep cooperating with countries that retain the death penalty. It's not enough to be against certain countries that are retaining the death penalty. It is important to set up a constructive dialogue with them. It is very important to promote the awareness through the debate on the real meaning of the death penalty, on people that are often sentenced to death despite being innocent. This is the worst thing ever that might happen to a credible justice that ends up being asymmetrical, unjust, hitting the poorest, the women, the most marginalized, informal and substantial justice. So the debate around these problems must be encouraged. Also when it comes to the so-called alternative measures, the Italian Ministry of Justice is deeply committed in this regard. We have recently developed a reform inspired by the National Recovery Resilience Plan, envisaging alternative punishments between freedom and imprisonment. There are some alternative penalties that are tailored to individual crimes, individual perpetrators, meaning that we have to give these people back their dignity, because even if a mistake they have made must be supported somehow. Let me quote Pope Francis in the address he made to the Pontifical Council for the Promotion of New Evangelization in 2017. He said that for a long time the death penalty was considered to be a suitable answer to the severity of certain crimes and an acceptable means, even if extreme, for the protection of the common good. Today, we are more and more aware of the fact that the dignity of the human person is not lost, not even once very serious crimes are perpetrated. Wise words, words of faith that come from the ultimate expression of faith today. And I hope that these words can actually set the stage from an uncontrolled development and mushrooming of fruitful reflections and dialogue during this Congress to make further progress towards the ultimate goal of the abolition of the death penalty. No justice without life. Italy is and will be in the front line to make sure that this principle can actually become a reality for everyone. Thank you very much.
Grazie mille, signor Vice Ministro.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Minister, for stressing Article 27 of the Constitution and for clearly stating that we are not interested in a revenge of the state, and for clearly saying that there are alternatives. You mentioned prevention, you mentioned alternative forms of punishment. There's not simply freedom or imprisonment. So thank you for your speech. Allow me to welcome the president of the community of Sant'Egidio, Mr. Impagliazzo, who has been following the session, and I will now leave the floor to the Minister of Justice of Morocco, Mr. Abdelatif Ouabi, a lawyer, a politician. In 2020, he was appointed Secretary General of the World Food Programme. Since autumn 2021, he has been Justice Minister and also Mayor. He is Mayor of a city in southwestern Morocco, Tardan. Minister, I leave you the floor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure and an honor for me to attend this international conference with you against capital punishment. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the organizers of the event for the efforts they have made to deepen and enrich the debate on this very topical issue, which is a major concern for the living forces of many countries, including mine. Ladies and gentlemen, the reform of the criminal justice in Morocco is something we've been working on for several years, in particular to comply with the provisions of the international conventions that the Kingdom of Morocco has ratified, the preamble to which guarantees compliance with the principal rights and duties concerning the right to life. In addition, this project is consistent with the outcome of the comprehensive national dialogue on the reform of the judiciary, the recommendations of the Equity, Fairness and Reconciliation Committee, and the remarks and problems that arise from the field. In this context, the death penalty remains a major subject of debate among various members of society and is considered a key point of the criminal justice reform. We notice that the orientation of the Moroccan criminal policy reflects the kingdom's positive interaction with UN Resolution 77/2002 regarding the death penalty, adopted by the Human Rights Committee in April 2002, which calls on all countries that still apply to gradually reduce the number of capital offenses. Secondly, defer the enforcement of existing death sentences until the death penalty is completely abolished. Thirdly, to inform the public, raise awareness as to the enforcement of the death penalty. What did I find out when I was appointed Justice Minister last year? I found out that our laws are consistent with the resolution 1984-50 of the Economic and Social Council of May 1984. The Moroccan justice treats the death penalty with great rigor and rationality, since the annual rate of convictions is less than 10 cases. There are less than 10 per year. The actual number of people sentenced to death for murder with malice aforethought or terrorism, the number of people sentenced to death so far is 83. 81 of them were men and 2 were women. His Majesty has granted a pardon to one of these women. We are waiting to see what might happen with the other woman. The royal pardon plays an important role in restoring the balance of the punishing and sanctioning policy, and it restricts the number of convicts through the transfer of a number of cases of capital punishment, the commuting to a life or fixed term sentence. For this reason, the total number of such cases, as reported, is 156 from the year 2000 to date. His Majesty has granted a pardon to 156 people who were sentenced to death. It should be noted that the Ministry of Justice ensures that bilateral conventions concluded in criminal matters and amendments and relevant amendments provide for the substitution of the death penalty with the worst penalty, with the most severe penalty for the same crime, within the framework of instruments of international judicial cooperation, which ensures the non-execution of the death penalty. In this regard, the public debate, awaiting the outcome of the public debate between opponents and supporters of the capital punishment, criminal policy has focused on the implementation of several measures that can gradually reduce a restrictive approach to cases that can be punished in this way through a number of tools. For example, the possible reduction of the number of articles providing for the death penalty to a maximum of 2 or 3 serious cases, such as terrorism, since the number of articles providing for this kind of penalty in the criminal code is 36. Second tool, life imprisonment, envisaging life imprisonment for the accomplice when the penalty envisages capital punishment, and reconsider the penalty for a sentence of imprisonment exceeding 20 years when a capital punishment is envisaged. In addition, the draft code of criminal procedure creates an effective mechanism to limit the death penalty by subjecting it to the unanimous agreement of the body that decides on the case, so unanimity. And we're trying to reconsider this as well, because again, it is unacceptable. Unanimity is subject to the report drafted for this purpose with the signatures of all the members of the judging body. In addition, there are more restrictive conditions relating to the execution of said sentence, in case in point that of granting exceptionally to the Minister of Justice the power to order its execution, unlike the general rules which assign this power to the public prosecutors. I could never agree on the execution of a death penalty, even if the law were to allow me to do so. So the debate on capital punishment between those who want to retain it and those who want to abolish it is a debate that keeps surfacing. It allows us to gauge social opinions which we are observing in order to achieve social agreement. This is the main goal of our current criminal and penal policy, whose consensual solution is the gradual reduction for the cases of this penalty in order to help stimulate the debate. Finally, I can only welcome this cultural initiative that tends to deepen the debate and exchange opinions, views, and best practices related to the event itself for a better justice. This is my battle. This is what I do as Justice Minister. I am a Justice Minister that represents civil society, and I ask for your help. Help us abolish the death penalty. Help us make this sentence come true. No justice without life. Let's make this truly happen. Thank you.
Signor Ministro, intervento.
Thank you very much, Minister. I can assure you from now on the support, the closeness of the community of Sant'Egidio in your battle for the abolition of the death penalty in Morocco. You also provided us with some positive insight, the reform of the criminal code, which is in progress, the reduction in the number of cases or articles for which the death penalty can be foreseen, and also the pardons by His Majesty. So thank you very much for the efforts you've been making, and your presence in this conference is definitely reason for hope. So we will keep supporting this process in your country. Thank you very much. I will now hand the floor over to the Minister of Justice and Human Rights from Burkina Faso, Bibitane Bie Ouedraogo.
Magistrata burkinabè con una lunga esperienza.
A magistrate in Burkina Faso with a long experience in the judicial system of the country, and she has a deep knowledge in human rights. Before being appointed Minister of Justice, she was advisor to the Court of Auditors, President of the Court of Appeal of Ouagadougou, and head of cabinet of the Minister of Justice.
Merci, Monsieur le Président de séance. Bonjour à toutes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Excellent. Monsieur le Président de séance.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the community of Sant'Egidio for inviting Burkina Faso to participate in this important international conference of the justice ministers. And today we are here to focus on these words, no justice without life. Allow me also to strengthen the importance of the cooperation between my country and the community of Sant'Egidio that allowed thousands of children in my country that live in remote villages to benefit from legality through the registration in the public registry with their names. So thank you on behalf of Burkina Faso to the community of Sant'Egidio. I would like to tell you something about my country. I think it might be useful for all those who have undertaken to abolish the death penalty. The history of my country tells us that the last execution took place in 1978 for ordinary crimes, and 1988 for military crimes. Until 2018, Burkina Faso was an abolitionist country de facto, and this translates the will of my country to go towards compliance with the highest standards regarding the abolition of the death penalty, so respect of human rights, etc. In fact, Burkina Faso has always voted in favor of the resolutions of the UN for the moratorium on the death penalty. We made some important progress in our country. In 2018, the international community asked us to ratify the second optional protocol regarding the International Pact on Civil and Political Rights, whose purpose was that of abolishing the death penalty, of repealing the death penalty. So how did we manage to repeal the death penalty in my country? Well, everything began in 2009, when Burkina Faso began to internalize the provisions of the Statutes of Rome, so they were actually transposed, more specifically regarding genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. In that occasion, a law was passed, a law that entailed sanctions for severe crimes like these, i.e. life imprisonment. In 2019, we adopted a new law, we passed a new law to protect children in danger. Article 78 of this law forbids to sentence to death any minors, regardless of the crimes they have committed. And this is in conformity with Article 5 of the African Charter of the Rights and Well-being of Children. After that, an actual debate took place regarding the abolition of the death penalty, which was promoted with great openness. And we went through a whole process leading to the adoption of the new criminal code. And this happened consistently with the adoption of the law on the protection of minors. So society experienced this lively debate. We were moving forward with the adoption of the new criminal code. And we reached consensus. We had agreement in this trend towards the abolition of the death penalty. So, when the law was passed in 2018, we were actually dealing with a law, a piece of legislation, where the worst punishment foreseen in Burkina Faso is life imprisonment. So this means that for ordinary crimes, there's an actual abolition of the death penalty in our country. So this is a humongous step forward we have made towards the abolition of the death penalty. And this law of 2018 was passed just shortly after the first terrorist attacks that took place in our country in 2015. What do I mean by that? I mean that for 5 years our country is legally testing the abolition of the death penalty in its legal system. And this is a benefit also internationally, because with this internal legal system whereby we don't talk about death penalty, our judicial cooperation requests have been welcomed by many countries, by many of our partners, international partners. And this is a very important step forward for our country, because we need cooperating with other countries so that our judicial system can further evolve. And so this is a very important point. We must not forget that, of course, with the rising terrorist attacks in our country, and also with the crises that are getting worse, due to the humanitarian emergency, there are people that are still wondering if these crimes shouldn't be rather sanctioned with a death penalty. So there's still people asking for a capital punishment. But these are very important voices we listen to with great attention. But we are convinced, as like we said yesterday, that the people in Burkina Faso are really caring about human rights. The people in Burkina Faso really care about life. So even if some people believe that the answer to give to certain crimes could be the death penalty, we are firmly convinced by the fact that the judicial response we should give to everything we are experiencing, terrorist attacks and the like, should never, never include the possibility of taking someone's life, regardless of the crimes they have committed. So this Congress we have the privilege to attend is extremely important for us. It is essential for us, for countries like ours that have to rise up to huge challenges, because this gives us the opportunity also to see the commitment of others, all those who fight for the abolition of the death penalty. These congresses are a source of inspiration for us. They are reassuring in telling us that we are on the right path. And there are answers that the state can give to every possible case, but that should always be based on the respect for life. Thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie mille, signor Ministro.
Thank you, Minister, for your speech, and thank you for stressing the troubled situation Burkina Faso is going through right now. We express our full solidarity to a country that is dear to us and that is suffering a number of terrorist attacks. And we thank you for what you said. Even in the light of these attacks, the death penalty is unacceptable. I thank you for stressing it once again and for giving us this interpretation, which better illustrates the choice of the people of Burkina Faso. A choice that is made even in exceptional moments, in moments that some may think require exceptional measures. But Burkina Faso decided to stay true to the international conventions, protocols, and stay true to the spirit of the country. So thank you very much. I would like now to give the floor to Indonesia. We have a video message by the Deputy Minister of Law and Human Rights of the Republic of Indonesia. He is a lecturer of criminal law at the University Gadjah Madja. He was appointed Deputy Minister of Law and Human Rights in December 2022, and he was an advocate of the reform of the criminal law, which was a big step forward because it prevents the death penalty from being enforced in Indonesia and offers the possibility of reviewing the situation 10 years after the ruling. So we will now listen to the video message by the Indonesian Deputy Minister.
Possiamo ricominciare perché non c'è l'audio del video neanche per i traduttori e in sala sicuramente.
I'm sorry, there was no...
Incontro, porgo le mie scuse per non essere presente, per prendere...
I'm sorry, I apologize for not being there with you at the Congress of the Ministers of Justice on the 1st and 2nd of March 2023. I would like to thank you for the opportunity that has been given to me. In this regard, I would like to virtually greet all the guests and organizers that are attending this symposium. Going back to an issue that we are addressing, a world without the death penalty, I will tell you what is happening in the debate between countries through the classifications of the new Indonesian criminal law, which was approved officially on the 6th of December 2022 and which came into force on the 2nd of January 2023 through the regulation of provisions of Article 1 of 2023, which is, in particular, deals with the death penalty. Dear friends, it is important for me to tell you that in the controversy concerning the debate on death penalty in a theoretical framework, we have two different lines of thought. On the one hand, we have the retentionist line of thought, those who want to keep the death penalty. On the other hand, we have the abolitionist thought, those who want to abolish the death penalty. The theoretical reasons for those who support the retentionist model are just as strong as the theoretical reasons that underlie the abolition, those who want the abolition. What we understand from the Indonesian criminal law, in particular Article 1 of 2023, is that the direction we're heading in is a way in between. We're trying to find a compromise between those who want to keep the death penalty and those who want to abolish it. But the death penalty, as framed by the new national criminal law, is no longer considered the capital, key, essential penalty. It is a special, very special, extraordinary penalty. So what is the feature? Well, mainly the principle that leads to the death penalty is much more selective, and there is a period of probation of 10 years. If in these 10 years the inmate has behaved well, according to the presidential decree consolidated, supported by the decisions of the Supreme Court, that ruling can be commuted into life in prison or a specific fixed-term imprisonment with a maximum of 20 years. So the philosophical pillars of this action are to be seen in the formulation of the death penalty as envisaged by the newly approved code. Dear friends, one of the ideas of the national criminal law is that of social rehabilitation. In a nutshell, the inmate who's been sentenced to death is given a possibility for a rehabilitation in order to return to the society. Society is able to welcome them, and surely never to commit crimes again, and thirdly, to become a citizen that can be useful to society. The link that this 10-year probation is undoubtedly a second chance that is given to the inmate to no longer commit crimes, to go back to a better life in society. This is the underlying idea. However, if the inmate during this 10-year probation period does not behave properly, if they continue to commit crimes, are involved in drug dealings and drugs and so on, or other sorts of violation within the prison, within the jailhouse, during this 10-year period, then there will be a capital punishment. So this is the situation. From a theoretical standpoint, the wording that we have in the criminal law is actually a compromise. It is a way in between, a compromise between those who want to keep the death penalty and abolitionists who want to abolish it. Surely the provisions in force envisaged by Article 100 of the criminal law that will they'll actually come into force on the 2nd of January 2026, if compared with the previous provisions regulating the death penalty in the previous criminal law, are undoubtedly better, and they take us to a paradigm of the law reform that takes into account, that focuses on amending rather than on revenge. This is the reform of the Indonesian criminal law. Thank you. Now, I would like to give the floor to Mario Marazziti for some concluding remarks after this very interesting morning session, which has been food for thought and has given us some good news, because what the Indonesian deputy minister is telling us is good news, the possibility of reconsidering the death penalty after 10 years in prison. Thank you. Thank you, Paolo. Thank you for listening, having listened to all the speeches. I don't really want to come to conclusions right now, because this is a beginning. We can all begin anew from here, and we can go far. So let's take seriously that request. Help us. That comes from Morocco, which is the request of each and every single one of us, because only by working together can we truly change things. This venue is a bit of a laboratory where we can come up with new ideas, a laboratory for friendship where everyone takes seriously the physical aspect. The Deputy Justice Minister was pointing this out. This capacity of listening to one another is the very foundation, the very cornerstone of the community of Sant'Egidio. And this leads us to an agenda, to what we must do now. When is it the right time to abolish the death penalty? We never truly have a majority when it comes to consensus before the actual path that leads to the abolition begins. Perhaps because we're lazy, because we are not aware of certain aspects. Look at France, for example. France is famous throughout the world for a number of enterprises, of feats. But the guillotine was an invention that came about during the French Revolution, because it was the quickest way to kill. When France abolished the death penalty during the Mitterrand's presidential term, the public opinion was very much divided. There was no clear majority. But immediately after that, France, just like the rest of the European Union, every single country, got a taste of another type of justice. They noticed that there was a reduction in violence. And today, the European Union would find it very, very difficult to reintroduce the death penalty, just like France. So public opinion can change, but we need brave leadership. Brave leaders that can take up this path even when there is disagreement or when there is no clear majority. That's why it is important for us to listen to one another and to listen what everyone has said regarding the path towards abolition. That's the first remark I wanted to make. It is very encouraging. But when we face terrible crimes, a part of the public opinion might be tempted to change their minds. They want the harshest, the strictest penalty that can act as an example. That is always something that is around the corner. That is why we have laws to protect all societies, all states from the instincts that may arise in very difficult moments. Because when we are troubled, when we face difficult situations, we might be capable of doing something we wouldn't in another situation. For example, Burkina Faso is experiencing terrorism. Italy, in the 1970s, experienced first-hand terrorism and violence. And this went on for a decade. But it overcame that terrorism with no special laws, never going back to the death penalty, never limiting the freedoms of citizens. We can win. It's actually a better victory this way, and the society that wins this way is more free. We have listened to everyone's presentation, Zambia and other countries, but every single country here can become, together with the community of Sant'Egidio, together by working with the international community, can become a new active agent, a new advocate that can help neighboring countries, friendly countries, to follow this path, follow the same path. So I hope that this meeting can help everyone study new ways of helping other countries embark on this journey here at an international level. What we've heard from Morocco is extremely encouraging. I think that the steps that lead us to a universal moratorium can continue. We can carry on along this path, and Morocco can play a number of roles, including that of showing that while the country might be wondering about the value of life and heads towards the value of life and regulate its criminal law in a pro-life way, the vote at the United Nations can switch from abstention to a vote in favor, because that would lead to no contradiction. It's about the steps that are to be made, and this is not only about Morocco. This is about all the countries that have opted for an abstention vote. I expect this even from the United States. We will be working in this regard. Together with the United States, Governor O'Malley, we would like to help the U.S. presidency to take that final step for an abolition, the federal abolition of the death penalty. This goal can be achieved before an abolition state by state of the death penalty. We will do all we can to achieve this goal. The Universal Moratorium and the United Nations. We have realized that we can change and we can win through synergy by working together. Concluding, I can say that we have mentioned the holistic approach, which means we are all connected. We have been shown, we have seen that there is never a magic moment to abolish the death penalty. We have seen this in Maryland. When you think it's the right moment, you're 2 votes behind. So when we talk about the resolution, the UN resolution on a universal moratorium, well, that actually, the whole story begins 14 years earlier, before 2007, when it was approved for the first time with a majority vote. And at first there was strong opposition to it, because even if some were acting in good faith, some non-European countries, non-Western countries, thought such a decision could impose a certain view of human rights, the view of the stronger countries, of the so-called giants, European Union, or in countries that are very strong in economic terms, and therefore that created confrontation. So the community of Sant'Egidio tried to unify the movement at a global level, and signing petitions. We collected 5 million signatures in hundreds of countries, and we handed this petition on the eve of the vote in 2007 to the UN General Assembly. And this showed that the leaders of the great world religions, common men and women of every country, of every cultural background, agreed. They supported this view. It was not a neo-colonial view of human rights. It was the wish of the world, what the people of the world wanted. We can work at several different levels to create a number of paths. So that's what we're doing. We are working together with countries that consider widespread crime and drugs, very serious crimes. We know we can help them. We know we can create synergies between states. We know we can strengthen the legal systems. We can strengthen public order. We can enhance public order. And this is a more effective way of solving the problem rather than retaining the death penalty. Now, we can work together to achieve these goals. Thank you. Thank you, Mario, for your final remarks. I would like to thank everyone in attendance. Thank you for attending this important meeting, this international meeting. I thank the speakers and the guests. I would like to thank the staff of the Chamber of Deputies that have allowed us and helped us organize this meeting. And I would like to ask the delegates and minister to take a picture. Thank you.